We are currently visiting a tower farm in Jamaica where 100 aeroponic towers are growing primarily basil and lettuce. Located in the heart of Kingston, this vertical farm is growing leafy greens and herbs in a region that is heavily dependent on food imports. And using 95% less water, these towers are perfectly suited for a country like Jamaica, where droughts are becoming more frequent and more severe year after year. Using this method of farming also saves up to 90% of the space required by traditional agriculture. This is a real solution for island nations that have limited farmland and that are experiencing constant urban expansion. One of the key advantages of this farm isn't just reducing food imports for obvious economical reasons, it's about improving nutrition and increasing access to fresh, healthy food for the nation. Every head of lettuce grown here means that there's one less item shipped from overseas, lowering the carbon footprint, supporting local farmers, and delivering fresher, healthier food that is affordable to people who need it the most. And this farm is living proof that yes, you can grow successfully leafy greens and herbs in a tropical climate, even with high temperatures and humidity. So why are aeroponic towers ideal for Jamaica? Well, firstly, as previously mentioned, the water efficiency is super important. These systems can save up to 90% compared to traditional farming, which is a significant advantage during drought seasons. And that's the hidden reality for Jamaica, which actually faces some serious water scarcity issues. And despite its green image, Jamaica regularly experiences seasonal droughts, particularly between January and April, when rainfall is at its lowest. And according to the Meteorological Service of Jamaica, drought events have increased in both frequency and severity due to climate change. These droughts impact the irrigation for the crops and soil moisture retention, making traditional farming even harder. And for example, in 2020, Jamaica declared a national drought emergency in several parishes, leading to water restrictions and crop losses. The reality contradicts with the global perception of endless tropical rain. Water scarcity is not only unique to Jamaica. Many Caribbean islands face similar challenges, which leads to limited freshwater reserves, over-reliance on aging water infrastructure, and also competition for water between agriculture, tourism, and urban needs. Next, there's space optimization. Vertical farming allows for high-density crop production, making it a super efficient use of limited land resources. Then you have soil independence, and by eliminating the need for soil, aeroponics circumvents issues related to soil degradation and erosion, which is prevalent in Jamaica. And so let's speak about the soil myths versus reality and why aeroponics is a game changer in the Caribbean. The myth is that Jamaica has fertile soil everywhere, and to the casual eye, the Caribbean appears to be a gardener's paradise. You have palm trees everywhere, rainforest, and green hills suggest that crops grow effortlessly. But the truth is far more complex. Much of Jamaica's arable land is mountainous or hilly, which is prone to erosion, and coastal areas and urban expansion have reduced the amount of available arable land or farmland. Then you have years of intensive farming, deforestation, and poor land management, which has severely degraded the soil in many regions. And in fact, the Food and Agricultural Organization, the FAO, has highlighted that soil degradation as one of the leading causes of declining agricultural productivity across the Caribbean. For example, in Barbados, they have lost over 70% of its arable topsoil. In Haiti, they have had very severe deforestation, erosion problems, which has really minimized the available farmland to a marginal amount. And for example, Jamaica alone loses an estimated 400 million tons of topsoil annually due to erosion. Tower Farms loses zero. Now let's speak about the Caribbean context and addressing food security in this region. These towers can allow for an import reduction. Jamaica imports really a significant portion of its food, leading to vulnerability in food security. Local aeroponic farming can mitigate this dependency, and places like Jamaica imports over 60% of its food. Imported vegetables that are arriving in the Caribbean often come from the US, Mexico, or Central America. So they're traveling thousands of kilometers before reaching Jamaican grocery shelves. This leads to higher cost and reduced freshness. And so why doesn't Jamaica grow more vegetables locally? Several interconnected factors limit the local production. First is climate volatility, where you have droughts, hurricanes, and floods that regularly wipe out traditional farms. Then you have limited arable land, and as noted earlier, hilly terrain and erosion restricts the available farmland in Jamaica. And then you have pest and plant diseases. These thrive in tropical climates and are hard to control in open soil farming. But on the towers, it's much easier to control in the Caribbean. And the reason is because they're not in direct contact with the soil. So you're not dealing with the same amount of pests that you would in traditional soil farming. So these issues are not just related to Jamaica. You have this across the Caribbean. For example, Barbados imports 80% of its food, whereas the Bahamas imports over 90% of its food. Local vertical farming on aeroponic towers can actually help to reclaim food independence for many of these islands, especially for high-value crops like leafy greens, aromatic herbs, peppers, and tomatoes. Then you have climate resilience. A controlled environment in agriculture, like aeroponics, offers stability against extreme weather events that are common in the Caribbean. Since these plants are receiving consistent irrigation cycles, they're not prone to all the problems that can be caused by flooding. They're receiving a precise nutrient dosage, which isn't always the case in the topsoil that's constantly being eroded. So the towers in this farm are configured with 9 levels, with 4 planting ports per level. That's a total of 36 plants per tower. Now, these towers are modular in size and they can actually go up to 13 sections, which means you'd have 52 plants per tower. But that size is only recommended when doing it inside a greenhouse. When you're outdoors in the tropics with the wind and the weather conditions that you have here, we recommend to keep it around 9 levels high, since it's the perfect size not only for accessibility, because most people can reach it, but it's also the perfect size to have when considering the amount of wind that they can have here. So you can grow 36 plants on a single tower in less than 1 square meter, but of course here they have spaced it out further apart, because for part of the year they're growing leafy greens and herbs, and for the other part of the year they're growing Scotch bonnet peppers. It's a highly prized spicy little pepper that's extremely popular in the Caribbean, and there's a high demand for it. And so by spacing 4 feet in between each tower, they can be sure that there's going to be enough space for the large branches that the pepper plants have. And basically, the more space that you have between your towers, the better, since it allows more sunlight, it allows more airflow, and those are crucial factors. So while you could only space it out about a half a meter in between each tower, the more space you have between each tower, the better. In theory and in practice, in real-world situations, and in our farm of agronomy, we have them much closer, and you see the results that we get in our farm. They're just as good as what you're seeing here behind me. It doesn't matter that it's hot, humid, rainy, that you have kind of extreme weather conditions. Just look at the results in this farm, and you will see that this is definitely a solution to complement the agricultural industry in the Caribbean. So let's speak about the crops that are growing in this farm. Many people who are growing in the tropics, they don't think that you can successfully grow basil or lettuce, and that's mainly due to the fact that most lettuce varieties are prone to issues like mildew, and even basil is prone to mildew in the Caribbean. So it's all about selecting the right crop varieties that have been selectively bred that are highly resistant to mildew, which is going to be one of the main issues that you deal with in the Caribbean. So in this farm, what they're doing is they're growing a variety of basil known as Nufar basil. This basil, you can see the leaves are slightly wrinkled and savoyed. That is normal. This is how the variety grows. It's not like the classic Genovese basil that has a very smooth surface. This variety is perfect for the tropics since it actually thrives in hot, humid environments without having mildew producing on the leaves, which is really a big plus when growing basil in the tropics because you really want to avoid having mildew issues. So they're successfully growing Nufar basil, which actually is a highly valued crop in the Caribbean. And it has a fast turnover, because it takes only 6 weeks for the basil to reach this size from the day that you transplant the seedling. Next is lettuce, which is actually a cash crop in the Caribbean. And this specific variety right here belongs to the Batavia family, also known as summer crisp lettuce. Summer crisp and Batavia lettuce have some of the highest heat resistance in all the lettuce families. So this makes it one of the best varieties to grow in the Caribbean. Not only does it have a high heat resistance, but it's also less prone to having mildew. It's highly resistant to mildew. And this specific variety right here is called Muir. And lettuce is a cash crop in Jamaica and across the Caribbean, since most of it has to be imported. Most of it is coming from Mexico, the United States, or Canada, and has to travel thousands of kilometers until it reaches someone's plate here. And a head of lettuce in Jamaica can actually cost upwards of $3 to $4 per head of lettuce. In this right here, we have 36 heads of lettuce, and you can see that it's thriving. It's looking great. Let's check out the health of the roots. It has super healthy white roots, very nice dense head of lettuce. And Batavia lettuce has some of the thickest, crunchiest leaves out of the entire lettuce family, making it a great lettuce for transportation. And because of these thick, crunchy leaves, it has a longer shelf life than most lettuce varieties. So let's discuss how these crops are actually growing without the use of soil. There is no soil inside these towers, since in hydroponics and aeroponics, you want to avoid any soil since it can bring pathogens, it can bring bacteria. So having a semi-sterile environment is really important. Everything in this farm is automated. At the bottom of this reservoir, there's nutrient-enriched water that is constantly flowing. This water includes all the essential minerals and trace elements that plants need in order to thrive. Inside this bottom reservoir, there's a floater. So as the water goes down throughout the day, this just progressively tops it off. So that means that you always have 70 liters of water that is inside this bottom reservoir, which anchors it down and helps to stabilize it during windy conditions. Inside the bottom reservoir, you have a low wattage submersible pump that operates at 45 watts, and it's on for 4 hours per day. It's an intermittent schedule, so it turns on for 3 minutes and then it turns off for 12. 3 minutes on and 12 minutes off constantly. What that means is that these plants are spending 80% of their time with their roots suspended and dangling in the air. And what this does is it increases the oxygen availability at the root level, which increases the absorption rate of nutrients, resulting in healthier, faster growing crops. Whereas in traditional hydroponics, the roots in most cases are submerged in water and they're forced to drink the concentration of nutrients that you're giving them. In this farm, it's one nutrient solution at one dosification for all the crops you grow. So it's much easier than in traditional hydroponics where you would need to switch the nutrients for tomatoes or for lettuce or for cucumbers. They each have their own nutrient formula. And that's because those crops in hydroponics, standard hydroponics, are forced to drink the concentration of nutrients that is in the water where the roots are submerged. But since the roots here are spending 80% of their time in the air, they only absorb what they need during the intermittent nutrient irrigation. Now let's check out the automated irrigation system and the automated nutrient dosing system. So all the water in this farm first starts in these tanks. This is the source water. This is municipality water from Kingston. That means that it's been pre-treated by the city, and we know that it has elevated levels of chlorine and calcium, which isn't ideal when mixing your nutrients, since chlorine and calcium in excess can potentially conflict with the nutrients that we're adding and cause nutrient lockout. So the first stage of filtration is that the municipality water goes from these storage containers and it goes through these right here, which is a water softener, also a decalcifier. So this removes calcium from the water, but it adds back a little bit of sodium chloride to the water, but that's much easier to filter than calcium. So the decalcified water then goes through this machine right here, which is a reverse osmosis filtration system. Reverse osmosis is going to remove all the TDS, all the remaining dissolved solids, and any kind of impurities that might be present in the water. And it basically strips out everything out of the water so that you're left with just water. The TDS levels, the total dissolved solids on a ppm of this reverse osmosis machine is a 2 parts per million. Whereas the source water, the municipality water, is at a 200. The reverse osmosis water is then stored in this container, and it is then pumped through a dosatron. A dosatron is a water-powered dosing system. So as the reverse osmosis comes through here, the pressure of the water activates these pistons that are inside the dosatron, and since we have it calibrated on 300 on each one, that means that for every 300 liters of water entering the farm, 1 liter of nutrients A and nutrients B are seamlessly mixed in. This is how we achieve precise nutrient delivery to all the crops. And these are the nutrient containers. And these are concentrate nutrients that are in a liquid form. So for tower farms, it comes in a dry form and you dilute it into reverse osmosis water. And in these containers, you have your essential minerals, also known as macronutrients, which includes phosphorus, potassium, and nitrogen. But you also have all your micronutrients, which include copper, molybdenum, zinc, manganese, amongst many others. So this is an ionic mineral nutrient solution, meaning that the minerals are in an ionic form that are bioavailable, ready for the plants to absorb. After the reverse osmosis water has gone through the nutrient dosing system and is dosed at a 1 to 300 ratio, it finally reaches this gravity tank. A gravity tank sits higher than the rest of the towers in the farm, and that's why it's called a gravity tank, because the water that's inside here, simply through the pressure of gravity, flows through these tubes and automatically fills up the towers. And as mentioned previously, each tower has its own float valve, which regulates the water. So this is essentially topping off the towers all throughout the day, ensuring that each tower has 70 liters of water at all times. And that's it. That's how this farm operates, fully automated, without having to worry about pH levels, EC levels, or nutrient levels.
There are many reasons why you might want to consider setting up a vertical farm using aeroponic towers. Maybe you're considering space saving, high nutrient density, water saving, or maybe again crop yield increase. One of the greatest advantages to me is the fact that a vertical farm using aeroponic towers does not require any experience. Someone without any experience can start a project like this one overnight and be guaranteed to have a first successful harvest. But there is one more advantage, which is the low energy footprint that is required to run a farm like this one. Now let's crunch some numbers and let's see exactly what it takes in terms of electricity to run a tower farm like this one. Now here we have 100 towers. Each tower operates with a 45-watt pump that is on for 3 minutes, off for 12 minutes, on for 3 minutes, 24/7. So that translates in 12 minutes per hour, 4 times 3, and it translates in 4.8 hours per day. Now let's remember the pump was 45 watts, so it amounts to 216 watt hours per day per pump. Now with 100 towers, let's multiply that by 100 and we end up with 21.6 kilowatt hours per day. This farm is also using a decalcification machine that we refer to as a softener, water softener, and then a reverse osmosis machine. And of course, it requires a pump to take the filtered water all the way to the farm. Now, with this system, you're looking at 2 to 2.5 kilowatt hours per day. So the pumps are going to require 21.6 kilowatt hours per day. So let's say 22 kilowatt hours per day, plus 2 to 2.5 for the reverse osmosis machine, as well as the water softener and the pump. So we're looking at 24.5, let's say 25 kilowatt hours per day. Let's put into perspective that a farm like this one is going to grow approximately 4,000 plants per month. So if we were just to take the very high electrical rates of Jamaica, which by the way, they're super high all throughout the CARICOM area, doesn't matter the island. In fact, I will extend it to every island nation in the world. So in Jamaica, where the price per kilowatt hour is around 23 cents, we're gonna say between 23 and 25 cents because those rates fluctuate from one month to the next. 23 cents US per kilowatt hour will translate in about 4 to 5 cents per plant per harvest. Now, if you consider that it will cost about 1.5 to 2 cents per head of lettuce for the nutrients, between the nutrients and the electricity, you're going to average around 5.5 to 6 cents per head of lettuce. Now, let's speak about why we have a single pump per tower rather than a central pump configured in a closed-loop irrigation system like for conventional hydroponics. Well, with conventional hydroponics, where you have a main sump, a main tank with the water and the nutrients, when it travels from one plant to the next all throughout the farm and comes back to this main tank, the water is buffering and the electroconductivity is constantly changing, and so is the pH. You constantly have to deal with pH discrepancy, electroconductivity readjustment. We do not have this problem with this aeroponic tower technology. And the reason is because we have much more water and nutrients per plant. And since the water is not traveling, affecting its ions, we experience very stable pH and electroconductivity at all time. The other incredible advantage is the fact that The water and the nutrients from one tower does not communicate with the other. There will be no cross-contamination from one tower to the next, contrary to a hydroponic system when the pathogens are in the water and it's traveling and the water is traveling on a closed-loop system, every single plant in the farm gets affected. So from preventing cross-contamination from one tower to the next, to having a stable pH and a stable electroconductivity, having single pumps for each tower is the key. It is now mid-June in Jamaica, so we're talking about hot and humid. And this farm shows clearly that you can grow healthy leafy greens and herbs, and by the way, many other vegetables, using this technology outdoors in a tropical climate. You may want to consider setting up a greenhouse. And there are different levels of greenhouses that you can consider. Now here, it's not only just tropical, but it's a region that is prone to hurricane. So you wouldn't want to consider a fully climate-controlled greenhouse, because aside from the energy that is necessary to run that greenhouse, when a hurricane comes by, it's going to destroy everything that you will have inside that climate-controlled greenhouse, including your fans, your evaporative cooling pads, etc., etc. So a fully climate-controlled greenhouse in a tropical climate can only be considered in a region where you're not going to get typhoons and hurricanes and tornadoes. The weather needs to be pretty stable because, again, it will destroy your structure. When even considering a fully climate-controlled greenhouse in a tropical climate, the main consideration is the electricity that is required to run this structure. Because when you're in a tropical climate, in a greenhouse, the only way to cool off the greenhouse is going to be by using evaporative cooling pads. The problem with cooling pads is that, yes, they're going to cool off the premises, but they're going to add more humidity. And in a tropical climate, the problem is not just temperature, but mainly humidity. So now we're adding more humidity to cool off the premises. So how do we offset that? By installing commercial dehumidifiers throughout the greenhouse. So now we have the evaporative cooling pads, we have the dehumidifiers. So yes, in a tropical climate, you can go for the option of a fully climate-controlled greenhouse as long as it is not in a hurricane zone. But again, the problem will always be that it requires lots of electricity. So for tropical climate, I'm more inclined to recommend a more low-tech version of a greenhouse. The number one thing you want to think about when setting up a greenhouse, regardless of the greenhouse, is to have a very strong metal structure, a very strong skeleton for your tower farm. It's crucial, and I explain myself why. So back to my advice of a low-tech greenhouse. The low-tech greenhouse is going to consist of having a roof that will be made out of polyethylene. It can be a polyethylene tarp that will just filtrate the sun between 3 and 6%, although not necessary. It's going just to be able to have the polyethylene tarp that covers as well the sides or not. I prefer to leave the sides open and to stretch around. Instead of the walls, I would just consider putting a anti-thrip netting. Anti-thrip, you know, the thrips are the very small insects. So the anti-thrip netting is that micro netting that prevents insects from coming in. But it's not just about preventing the bad guys from coming in. It allows you to keep the good guys inside. Say that you're gonna release some pollinators inside your greenhouse. Well, having open sides as well as that anti-thrip netting protecting from the bad pests but keeping the pollinators inside is a very important consideration. So whether you decide on a low-tech greenhouse to cover the sides because it's the rainy season, too much rain enters inside the farm, or whether just during most of the year you prefer to leave it open with some micro netting that protects from the pests outside and keeps the good guys inside. All the options are on the table. Whether you open the sides or not, having that structure is going to infringe upon airflow. It's going to slow down air circulation. So whenever you have a greenhouse, even if it's a low-tech greenhouse, you need to have lots of fan power to fake the wind, to simulate the breeze. And there is one more component that is crucial, is to consider putting a motorized O-knot, a retractable shading cloth that will be about 25% to 35% filtration. They go between 10% all the way to 50%. Ideally, in a tropical climate, you would want to be around 25 to 35% max. What the shading cloth allows you to do is during the hottest hours of the day, let's say between 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. or 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., you stretch that cloth, you protect your plants with that cloth, which allows you to grow a wider range of crop varieties. When outside like this, you need to have cultivars that really can take the heat, because these plants are not just beautiful, they're survivors. If you knew how hot it has been here in Jamaica over the last 3 to 4 weeks, and when you see how vibrant these greens are, I consider these greens nothing short from being heroes. But when considering commercial farming in a tropical climate using a greenhouse, you want to optimize your crop yield. You want to increase the amount of vegetables that you can grow in terms of the choice that you have to do so. And it is why having a retractable shading cloth that you only use for a certain amount of hours during the day and that you retract when it's time to do so late afternoon is key to an ongoing successful farming experience. Now back to Jamaica and to any other islands around the world where hurricanes are a problem. The reason why I advise to use a low-tech greenhouse versus a high-tech greenhouse is that when a hurricane comes, you can just pack your towers, put them somewhere in a container, in a house, exactly like last year when the hurricane hit Kingston. They took all these towers, put them inside the building that's over there, still connected them with a generator. When the hurricane just was over, they took the towers out and they had saved about 80% of the crops and 100% of the towers. Another big perk about this technology, it's how versatile it is. We have these type of farms outdoors like this. We have them on rooftops, inside greenhouses, indoors powered with LED lights. But one of the greatest advantage is really that you can set up this project almost anywhere. Check this out. Here we have over 100 aeroponic towers operating in a residential neighborhood of Kingston, Jamaica. The house next to it has been converted for the purpose of the farm. This space has been repurposed for the tower farm as well. Right in the heart of the city, we can grow vegetables that we can deliver without refrigeration to restaurants, to hotels, to supermarkets. It's unique in terms of versatility and in terms of freshness. Some customers will just be calling us and say, I don't know, I want 50 heads of lettuce, I want some basil, I want some Scotch bonnet peppers, and we will just go harvest those crops after we receive the order and deliver them to the customer within an hour or two. In other terms, when the customer placed their order, that plant was live, growing. Within 2 hours, it's delivered with its roots to the customer. Because why? Because we're able to do so being inside a residential neighborhood. Now, this is urban farming at its best. This is full agricultural autonomy. There is no more need of having a big field somewhere outside the city in order to be called a farmer.